Okay, I'm gonna start. I have the chat open in case people drop by. You can, I can see it on my other screen. I'm trying to use two screens here. Okay, enough of that. Enough of this. Yeah, I know who you are. Leave me alone, man. Alrighty. Yeah, see this. So here we are. This is week 4. Let's see if I can get this correct. And it's basically this week you have the EDAPT lesson, right? Like we have every week that you go through, and then the writing assignment. And the assignment is you're basically writing 3 complete paragraphs. You're going to write the introduction, one of the body paragraphs, and then you're going to write a conclusion paragraph. And the other thing is to make sure that you post or stop in the cyber cafe, right, which is the discussion for the week. What I'm going to do to try to help remind people to do it is because it's like it records people's attendance for the week. So they're having some issues here about some of the assignments. And like, so you can do the whole EDAP thing and then get your score and everything. And it doesn't record you as having attended for the week. So I'm hoping that they're like figuring that part out. In any event, the cyber cafe is where I will be dropping these little bits of information that I made up to try to help people with this this week's work. So I have the introduction here, and then I'm going to put in today. I'll probably put in something for the body paragraph and the conclusion. So the idea is basically for the introduction, you want to start broad and then move to narrow. And one of the things to do is for I usually tell people the first 2 sentences is you're trying to make someone interested in your essay right away. So you're using what they call a hook. So these are different types of hooks is what this other document is. So this is in the discussion for the week 4. You could start with a story. What you want the hook to do, right, is cause someone to be curious about what you're going to talk about. So telling a story about somebody, you don't want this to be a story about yourself first. So you want to find a story in research, right, in some article about some person, and then you could tell their story. But stories are one of the best ways to like get people interested, because it's like we can't not pay attention to a story. Well, like our human brains automatically follow it. So telling a story is a good way to do this. You could bring up the opposing position that you're about to argue against. Some people like that strategy. It's almost like it's a counter argument. So you bring up the other side. You're like, everybody thinks this, and then you'll end up being like, but actually, this is creating curiosity. This is somebody just using, like, you don't know what they're talking about till they get to what their main subject is, right? Like, it's taking over our lives. We can do it almost anywhere, and so on. And then you figure out, right, it's texting. That's the creating curiosity. So that's like a mystery sort of thing. Challenging a common belief. Historical examples also a little bit like telling a story, because it's from the past. Like, so we're doing social media, right? A story from the beginnings of social media, who knows? Anyway, the whole point is that it brings up the subject in a very broad way, makes people interested in it, and then sort of gets you going into the rest of the introduction. The last idea is posing a question that you eventually will answer. So this is a question, like, you don't want to actually ask the reader a question. Like, you don't want to be like, so have you ever thought about da da da? You would rather try to think about, like, is social media destroying society? Something like that. And then you can go, eventually, meaning you'll answer it, meaning you'll address it. That's all. So you want to take a look at those and decide, and based on whatever your research is, you want to have a hook. And then basically the introduction goes. So I think you start with a hook, and then you have this sort of general sort of background part where you need to start very broad, right? And so in our case, you're talking about social media, right? Very broadly. And then sort of sentence by sentence, you then move towards your thesis, and then you end with your thesis statement, right? And your thesis statement is the position that you're taking, or the stance. I guess last week's document, right? You did the stance, and the comments that I made to people and that I put on your assignments were just trying to help people make their thesis as strong as possible. If I thought it was too narrow, I said maybe you would need to broaden it, and I gave some suggestions. If it was too broad, I said maybe you would need to narrow it, and I gave some suggestions there. But in any event, that's the basic formula for the introduction. So the rest of these are basically what I just went over, except it's just from a different thing that I made. I made that sheet, then I made this. These are other, I mean, these are basically the um, and like a little topic. So it gives this paragraph where the first sentence or two, depends, I guess, is the hook, right? And it's telling this little, actually, I guess I do the first one. And then it's giving some background. So it goes first, the first sentence is supposed to be the hook. Celebrating the revolution, French citizens sent King Louis the 16th to the guillotine. You're like, all right, guillotines are cool, so then you would want to keep reading. And then it gives a little background about the history of corporal punishment, or not corporal, capital punishment, right? So every day in Halloween, ancient Rome. So it gives this little background. So it's giving a historical background, and then it's sort of mentioning a lot of people have issues with this subject about capital punishment, and then gets very specific and ends with our society should keep the death penalty to deter crime. So that's their position statement, right? So you got a hook, some background, like from very broad, and then getting closer, and then you end with your thesis. Yeah, so I even put the Halloween. I guess I included the second sentence as part of the hook. And then narrowing it, you start to move into where you're going to be talking about, and then there's the thesis. Right, so that's, oh yeah, things, what that was about, okay. All right, so the other thing, I guess, would be at the end of since it's your introduction, you need to have a thesis statement. So the whole point of a thesis statement is that it's taking a very clear position on a subject. Most people in the class don't have a problem with this, right? I think most people picked, you got the subject of social media, and you're going to talk about what it does or doesn't do. And so I think everybody sort of has that pretty good. You don't want to use the first person, right? This is the you don't want to just be like, I think, or my opinion, this, like, so they're trying to, you get rid of that. You don't really use evidence in a thesis statement, so you're not using a quote from anything. So your thesis statement is a non-I statement, meaning you don't use I, where you're basically saying, here's how things are, right? Or here's the problem, the issue, whatever it is you're bringing up. And what I tell people is that you want to have three. Those are the problems with these statements, but you want to have three main ideas, right? For your essay. So whatever, if I do something like social media is harming teenagers, I'm going to have three separate ways that they're doing harm. All right, so you want to make sure you have sort of three separate ideas that you can develop each one on its own. This will be more useful if afterwards. This is just like things that I've already sort of mentioned, right? The thesis, these are problems with possible problems with thesis statements. They're too broad, they're too narrow. So you can look over this if you're too vague. I think that's the end of my thing. Okay, good. All right. So your thesis statement, and one of the things that you can do with your thesis statement is find a way to include your three main topics, right? So if I did social media is harming teenagers because, and then I would give my three things, right? Because it gives them unrealistic image of unrealistic body images. It gives them unrealistic expectations for the future, and it exposes them to mean people or something like that. So I would create a thesis statement that has the three main issues in it. Let me go here. So I'm in student mode here, so you can hopefully I see what you actually see. So I've just put this student resource button in, right? This is in the modules page, right? So here are all the modules, week 1, 2, and close all these. There's week 4. At the top, I put this student resources. So these are mine that I have that I'm trying to put in here at the, that will be actually useful. The broadcasts I will put here. So basically, I'm going to post things in two places just to make sure everybody can, sees it somehow. So I'll put a copy of things in this student resources module, and then I will put a copy also in the week's discussion or Cyber Cafe. So there'll be two different places that you can access it. Okay, so this is my developing paragraphs idea. So you need to do, so that was the introduction, right? You need to do a body paragraph. So a body paragraph has a topic sentence. The very first sentence of a body paragraph should be one of those main ideas that I was talking about, right? My advice, although it doesn't always need to be like this, but my advice is if you can create a sentence using the word because, it's often a good topic sentence. I even say that about a thesis because it forces you to fully express whatever point it is you're making, right? So if I do social media is harming teenagers, that's one way. If I do social media is harming teenagers because it does these things, that's a better thesis statement. It's just stronger, it's more complete. So then for your topic sentence, you want to do a similar thing and start the paragraph with whatever the first main idea is that you're going to deal with. So social media is harming students because it gives them unrealistic images, body images or something. And I'm going to deal with that whole, whatever, body dysmorphia in that section. And it might be one paragraph, it might be two paragraphs, who knows. But I have that main idea that I'm going to deal with. Okay, so you want your topic sentence. It's like a mini thesis, basically, right? So the thesis for the big paper comes at the end of the introduction. And then the topic sentence is basically like a mini thesis for each of the three main ideas that you have, right? And you create a sentence that basically starts you off. I think I made this specific to also help people after you've done that, after you have a topic sentence, then people are like, what do you write next? You want to base it on what your topic sentence says, right? So, and I tell people one of the ways to do that is that you develop the first part of the sentence, like you put in information and talk about that part, and then you turn around and do the same thing for the second half of this statement. So that's sort of how I know we don't, I don't know, it seems like we don't really think about topic sentences like that. but that's in fact, they're like maps of what you're supposed to say. So you come up with a complete sentence, and then you look at the first part of the sentence and decide, what do I need to support that? Like, what information am I going to need that will help me prove this part? So I try to find, information or evidence, and I prove the first part, and then I do the second part, right? So you can take a look at this PowerPoint. I'll put it in the. Oh, look at that. That's pretty handy. Yeah, and so developing the paragraph is basically, you have to have the topic sentence, then you focus on the first part of that sentence and you develop and you add evidence, and then develop the second and add evidence, sort of like that's a formula idea of it. Oh, the end, thank you. So if you want to see this, so like I said, I will drop this in the Cyber Cafe, but right now, if you want, right, you can have access to it here in the student resources. All right, so I'll have those there so you can access it, and then I will drop them bit by bit sort of into the Cyber Cafe. All right. Let me take a look here. All right, so the conclusion, let me see if I have, well, probably won't want me in resources. Conclusion. I just made that so you can see the conclusion one also. All right, so the conclusion is sort of the opposite of the introduction. You have to make different moves to get out of the essay than you did to get into the essay. So you got into the essay by being very broad and then sentence by sentence, ending with your thesis. When you do the conclusion, you're already in your essay, right? You've just finished talking about your third main idea, and then you need to sort of get broad again, right? And so you're trying to broaden it out. The idea is that you're summarizing the main argument that you've made. You can think of it like I don't know if people have seen a lot of court shows. We used to watch them a lot, but like when they make final arguments in a trial, the lawyer's job is to be like, okay, here's what we've shown you. And that's sort of what you're doing here. You're like, so here's what I've shown you, that this and this and this. And you also want to leave an impression. That's the other goal. So the last couple of sentences, you're really trying to, leave it so that the person will remember what you said. That's basically it. All right, so let me see if I have. So I went through and highlighted little bits about what the conclusion is supposed to do. And then I tried to make this game, which I was like, here are these 3 different conclusions. One of them's basically garbage. One of them's like, okay. And one of them's supposedly good. But you read them and then you decide sort of what those are. Oh, adequate. That's what it was. Oh, then I go and here's the answers, I guess. I thought it was interesting. Okay. Right. So this is the bad conclusion, which we don't need to spend too much time on. And here's why, right? It's unspecified. And this is the adequate one. Oh, wait. There's my little thing. There it is. So it's basically, the more specific you get, the better the conclusion is, right? So you don't just do a general, you're trying to start specific and then end with the generalities. So you would start by explaining what what you've just sort of proven, and then you're sort of moving to social media in general, and then you're trying to lead with it could be a warning, it could be whatever, call to action. It does depend a little bit on what your subject is. But these are the conclusion PowerPoint explains or shows that. So those are the 3 things, the 3 paragraphs that you're going to be writing. let me go back to this page. They want you also to set it up so that you're, do student view. You're basically also setting up the essay, meaning format wise. So if I go to the week 4 business, right, and you also have the EDAPT, right? So that's just normal in the sense that for what we've been doing every week, you go through that. This is, I've just been talking about the main writing assignment. So they're going to give you the sample argument research essay is the thing that you want. And I'm going to see if, what's that not? Okay. So they want you to do, and the way to do this, or at least what I'm doing, is I'm using the example that they've given. So I mean, this is my whole thing with formatting. So I would just take the example, and I'm basically just going to put my own things in there. So right, I have my title, name, school, class, professor name, and date, right? And you're supposed to have 3 paragraphs, basically. Well, this is an entire essay, right? So you're going to have your introduction. You're going to have one of your body paragraphs, right? And then you're going to have your conclusion. Good to have this. What they do want to make sure you also have, though, right, is the title page, and then you also have a reference page. So you need to put whatever references you found so far that you're using in APA style. So I say download the example and just use that, right? Put your information in it instead. The other thing, the other document that they give is just the overview of the whole process. Right. And I mean, here's what you did each, like it's trying to be like each week is a step to the final product and so on. So it's just like, I don't know, help people see what ultimately what you're supposed to get to, I suppose, to help you see that part. But okay, I think that is probably it. I'm gonna turn off the recorder and then we'll see where we are.